Well, greetings, vinyl community. Today I have a special treat for you. A number of times over the years in these videos I've presented kind of deep dives into albums that are very special to me, very important albums, and I thought today I would do a deep dive into an album that is really unimportant and pretty much universally regarded as a stinker, and that is Love Beach by Emerson, Lake and Palmer from 1978. Love Beach was Emerson, Lake and Palmer's seventh studio album, technically. It's hard to count because their third album was Pictures at an Exhibition, and that's a live album, but it's all new material that hadn't been released before, so it has the feel of a studio album. It's all new stuff. And on the other hand, Works Volume 2, which came directly before this one, was just a ragbag of odds and ends. So even though it's technically a studio album, it doesn't seem like one. And it did include stuff that had been released before on singles. This, however, is a true studio album that was recorded altogether as an album, and it was not recorded under the best of circumstances. The band were being tax exiles at the time, so they recorded this in the Bahamas, and you can see that they all got nice suntans while they were there in the sunny Caribbean. And I guess you just get a little Caribbean sky on the back there. This is not a gatefold album, so it doesn't fold out into a wonderful panorama of the Love Beach itself. They weren't real happy with one another at this time, so they basically just went into the studio, knocked the album out, and left as soon as they could. There's nobody credited as producing the album, and it shows. It's not really produced. It doesn't sound great. Strangely enough, it was Lake and Palmer who pretty much laid down all their stuff and split, leaving Emerson to knock it into an actual album. And what Emerson did was mostly downplay his own contributions, it seems. I think maybe out of embarrassment. So you kind of get the picture. This is not Emerson, Lake and Palmer's finest hour. It charted in the US at number 55, which is by far their lowest chart placing, except for that Works Volume 2 ragbag previously alluded to. All their previous albums had made the top 20. So 55 was not a disaster, but definitely not very good for Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They did get a gold record out of it somehow, as did all of their 70s albums. This was their last studio album of the 70s, in their original 70s incarnation, meaning that there was a reunion in the 90s, which didn't go very well because they actually produced an album in the hot seat that was worse than this one. But that's another story. We're talking about Love Beach, so I will take you there to Love Beach, and we'll talk about the songs on side one, beginning with All I Want Is You. This is the song that was released as a single. So when you think of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, you think of Moog synthesizers and that crazy Hammond organ and Keith Emerson's stage histrionics and antics. What's the first thing you hear in All I Want Is You? An electric guitar. Greg Lake's voice. It's very much Greg Lake's baby. He is not known as a great rock guitar player. It's a pop song. There is no instrumental solo in it at all. No guitar solo, no keyboard solo. It's just a vehicle for Greg Lake's pop star ambitions. The second song is the title track, Love Beach, and it's exactly the same as the first song. Starts right in, no kind of introduction, just jumps right in with guitar and vocal. There's no keyboard solo. Emerson is just really being steamrollered on both of these tracks. Just a simple, unexceptional pop rock song. Third song is, well, not as anonymous as those first two. It's called Taste of My Love. And to begin with, there actually is an instrumental introduction. So we're starting to hear a bit more of the band for a change. Then it goes into those lyrics. And if you think that Taste of My Love might be something that's going to lead to a double entendre, well, not exactly, because there's nothing double about it. It's just plain right out there. It's a dirty song. And Greg Lake is just loving it. He relishes what he thinks is so clever and naughty. And oh dear, A Taste of My Love. The food metaphors come thick and fast. Now, Greg Lake, he's look at this cover. Everybody says, oh, it looks like a Bee Gees album. Well, Greg Lake's got his shirt tied, so he doesn't look too chunky there, but boy, in Taste of My Love, he comes up with lines like, call up room service, order peaches and cream. I like my dessert first, if you know what I mean. We know what you mean, fat boy. So, in addition, we get, when Greg Lake's, not Greg Lake's lyrics, I'm sorry, Pete Sinfield's lyrics. Pete Sinfield, lyricist for the early King Crimson, wrote all the lyrics for this album, so we can blame him for Taste of My Love. I shouldn't be blaming Lake. There is just a passing mention of the East, and this is followed by Keith Emerson doing one of those stereotyped Chinese chinky chinky chung chung racist riffs. It's really embarrassing. The whole album is really embarrassing, but that's got to be a low point. So, once we get past that, and still, there's no keyboard feature, even if Emerson's pulling stunts like that one, there's no keyboard feature, there's no solo. What is an Emerson, Lake and Palmer album without show-offy solos? So, but at least there's some audible keyboard on that track. Next track is The Gambler. And this is kind of a return to the slight Wild West concept that the band had on their trilogy album with The Sheriff and Hoedown. It starts off with harmonica. That's kind of an unusual inclusion for an Emerson, Lake and Palmer album. But at least there's a keyboard solo. Yes, it's the first solo on the whole album in track number 4. Then we get to a rather interesting song, finally, For You, which has an extended instrumental introduction. I've been complaining about these other songs just sort of jumping right in because it's all being a showcase for Lake's pop star ambitions. No, For You, we get a nice extended instrumental introduction. It's got a Spanish feel to it. This is a song with a bit of a Spanish tinge because when the actual song part comes in, it's got a tango feel. And it does change. It ends up with more of a rock beat. So it's a bit more ballady, a bit more creative than anything we've heard heretofore on the album. Finally, 6th song on the side. Yes, an Emerson, Lake and Palmer album with 6 whole songs on one side because they're so short and don't have solos. And it's an instrumental. And it's really, really great. It's the one track on here that's really, really good, Canario, an adaptation of the final movement of the Fantasía para un Gentilhombre by Spanish 20th century composer Joaquín Rodrigo. 20th century, he spanned almost exactly the 20th century. His birth and death dates are 1901 to 1999. However, he didn't exactly write the Canario. The Canario, or Canarios, as it originally was, is an adaptation, as is the entire Fantasia para un gentilhombre, of music by the 17th century Spanish guitar composer Gaspar Sanz. So it's, on this record, an adaptation of an adaptation. Obviously, it's based on the Rodrigo orchestration of the original Sanz music. So it's not just Rodrigo just didn't take a straight rewriting of the Sanz piece. He did add his own flourishes, which are found in the Emerson, Lake and Palmer adaptation. So that's a really rollicking and energetic piece, and it's the first bit of energy that we really get on the whole album, and the last that we'll get pretty much, as far as something that really stands up with the best of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And another notable factor of it is that it does go into the hemiola beat that is characteristic of the song America. So it's got that the one that the Nice did, the West Side Story America. It's got that hemiola beat, which is where it switches between triple and duple meter in a 6/8 time frame. So it goes 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. I like to live in America. That kind of beat. It does exactly the same thing in here, and it really is a nice link to Emerson's past. Now, before we move on to side 2, I'm going to go back to the album's packaging, because nestled inside this wonderful cover with the Bee Gees lookalikes on the front is a flyer, a nice 2-page fold-out flyer for Love Beach merchandise. You can get a satin jacket. You can get a t-shirt. Not with Emerson, Lake and Palmer on it. It simply is a t-shirt that says Love Beach with these bizarre chromium mannequins showing it off. You can even get jogging shorts. Who would want to be without Love Beach jogging shorts? You could get the satin jacket for $69.96. That's in $1978. That's not cheap. Jogging shorts were a bargain at $7.50. And then inside, we get the Emerson, Lake and Palmer discography. And interestingly, Works Volume 2 is omitted. It's named here, it's mentioned, but it's not shown. It just had a plain white cover. It's not much to show. But Emerson, Lake and Palmer Love Beach merchandise. I've just got to wonder how much of that they sold. So on to side 2 of Love Beach. There's side 2 of the album. It's a side-long prog rock epic. Ooh, now we're talking. Side 1, except for Canario, was pretty much all focus on Lake, and boy, he took every advantage of it. He is really hamming it up on these songs. His vocals are just bellowing. With no producer, nobody's reining him in. And, you know, on the past Emerson, Lake and Palmer albums, he was the producer generally, so nobody ever really reined him in. But on this album, he just takes every chance he gets to just eat the microphone. But on side 2, Emerson does get his way. He gets to shine for a change. He did, of course, on Canario, but it's a piece written by Emerson called Memoirs of an Officer and a Gentleman. And it's in 4 movements: Prologue / The Education of a Gentleman, Love at First Sight, Letters from the Front, and Honorable Company, subtitled A March. First 2 movements are both very ballady, so there's a lot of florid classical style Emerson piano. And again, all the words about officer, very British, honorable, as the title suggests, a gentleman, and a very romantic image of the British military in wartime. Where was I going with that? I don't remember. Anyway, all those lyrics are by Sinfield. I think I hadn't said that yet, and that's where I was going before I backed myself into a corner with all my verbal nonsense. Two movements, as I said, of not really rock, but at least Emerson is finally getting to be part of Emerson, Lake and Palmer and not just being hidden in the background. He's always been the showman. He's always been the centerpiece of the band. So here we have it, but it's not really rocking it up until finally in the third movement, Letters from the Front, it begins with an instrumental passage for the whole trio, and it's pretty nice. It's really good after all the stuff that's gone before to hear the trio playing again, but it's not real energetic. It's the rock part of the piece, but it's not high tempo. It's just there. And it goes into a pretty nice, the whole side is pretty nice. Pretty nice vocal section. Until everything turns really sad and we go back to the slow stuff. Finally, there is the Honorable Company March, which is an instrumental section, and that's really good. It does feature about 1 billion keyboard overdubs. So none of this is stuff that Emerson, Lake and Palmer played live because they were falling apart when they were recording this album. They didn't tour after recording it. They just broke up. But they never could have played that live because it's just got an enormous number of overdubs and it's really over the top and it's got the excess that defines Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So it's a pretty good way to go out. And as a whole, I would say that because Canario is great, and because Memoirs of an Officer and a Gentleman, it's not great, but it's pretty good. It's a very listenable piece. It doesn't have a lot of the elements that made Emerson, Lake and Palmer great, but it's still a good prog rock extended piece, just on a much lower key than their previous epics, like Tarkus and Carnival 9, which were just hugely full of electricity and madness. This is not that. This is a kinder, gentler Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and if you can go along with that, well, there you are. This single from the album was All I Want Is You. Here's a promo copy of it from Atlantic. It's one of those mono, red and white, stereo blue A and B things from Atlantic Records. So there's the stereo side, there's the mono side. It did not chart. And here's a German version. The Germans wisely put Canario on the A side, so I don't know if that did him any good in the German market. Boring picture sleeve, it's just taken from the album cover. And this is on the Areola label. And there you have it. That's pretty much the album that killed off Emerson, Lake and Palmer in the 70s. They came back as, sort of, 2/3 of them came back as Emerson, Lake and Powell in the 80s. And when that fell apart after one album and one tour, a different 2/3 came back as 3, with Emerson and Palmer joined by Robert Barry. And finally, Emerson, Lake and Palmer returned in the 90s, but by then it was too little too late. So thanks very much for watching. Be well. Talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.